What up everyone, Shark here. Welcome back to the channel. What I'm going to do today in this Shark Please Explain is just go through the impact of a single change from the most recent patch. It is a change where the devs modified the penetration and damage values of some of the heat shells available to American armor and the implications that it has for Russian IFVs and vehicles. So without further ado, let's get to it. So I want to talk today about the change made to tank guns on the US side to make their performance against Russian IFVs a little bit more consistent. And so you see in the patch notes here, the goal is to decrease the number of shots required to kill for any vehicle with 16 HP and 200 heat armor or less to 2 shots. Obviously with more armor, it'll take 3. The vehicles affected by this change are the M1A1HC, the M1A2, the M1A2 SEP, the M1A2 SEP V2, the M1A2 SEP V3, and the M8 Thunderbolt. And I'll cover some of the other US vehicles and the implications for their guns later on in the video. Now, the gun changes essentially mean one thing, is that in general, Russian light vehicles and IFVs under or including 200 armor can be 2-shot by all of the affected US tank guns. However, there are 3 vehicles that I want to highlight whose up armor kit allows them to straddle that line. So first off, I have Sprut here on the chart because this is the dividing line, 16 HP and 200 armor. The 3 vehicles affected are the Cornet T or Chrysanthema, depending on your weapon combo, from the Guard spec. For 15 up armor, you basically get a lot of additional survival, which I think for the Chrysanthema in particular is really important in allowing it to get more of those missiles off and do some damage to the US armor. From the Coastal spec, the BT3F for 20 points gets that additional survivability, which is extra dangerous because you can fit a Morpehi and a Chorny Beretti in there. And then for the mechanized spec, the BMP3 again goes from 14 HP and 100 armor to 16 HP and 400 armor with just a cost of 20 points. And so really what the devs tried to do here is make it so that without up armor, the transports are 2-shot to kill, and then with up armor, they're 3-shot to kill. And so as an example here, we've got the Sprut. So the Sprut is exactly on the line, right? As it is, like untouched, it's 14 health and 80 frontal armor. And then with the cage armor upgrade, it is 16 health and 200 armor. So exactly what the dev said was their cutoff line for this. And so you'll see here, I've got an unarmored Sprut on the right and an up armored Sprut on the left. And the magic number on the right is 7 damage for a 2-shot to kill, right? Because it's 14 HP. And then on the left, the magic number is 8. And so you can see with the changes to the heat round from the Thunderbolt, and this is reflected in all the other tank guns that I highlighted before, it should 2-shot kill both of these Spruts. So we'll start here, turn off the MGs, and we'll just have it fire. And you see right there, first heat round does about 2/3 damage. All right, that Sprut's dead. Now we're going to target the up armored Sprut SD, and you can tell from the calculator that it's going to 2-shot this vehicle. But basically, as long as it connects twice, boom, 2-shot for 16 HP and 200 armor. All right, so in the Russian deck, there are 3 units that without up armor are below the 16 health, 200 armor threshold, but with up armor are above it, right? So you've got the Chrysanthema or the Cornet T from the Guards motor. It's not an IFV, but I wanted to highlight here. And so you see the low armor version is clearly a 2-shot up armor version because the gun has to switch to the Sabo. It's a 3-shot here, 6 damage, need to cross the 16 barrier. The BT3F, this is from the Coastal spec. And the BMP3M, this is from the mechanized spec. These all go from a 2-shot kill to a 3-shot kill with the up armor, primarily because their armor goes from 180 to 400. So quick little iteration here of testing to demonstrate. 2 shots for the Chrysanthema without the up armor. 3 shots with the up armor. BT3F, same story, right? So the changes to the heat round only really make a difference at 200 armor and below. So the Sprut SD and everything below. There are a fair number of Russian vehicles that even with up armored stop at 180 armor. Those are going to be two-shot by any of these tank guns that got upgraded. So basically all the Abrams minus the FEP and the M8 Thunderbolt. I just want to highlight two other IFVs. So the B10 Kurganets and the K16 or K17 Boomerang. In their configuration, they are always going to be a two-shot from these tank gun rounds, but they can come with very cheap APS, 4 charges apiece. And so keep in mind, if you're facing primarily missile threats or infantry, these carriers are still extremely durable. If the primary threat you're facing is from vehicles and direct fire, then these become just slightly less viable as they continue to be two-shot. One unit I wanted to highlight that I think is sometimes slept on is the BMO-T from the Guards Motor Spec. Up armored, basically default armor, it's 16 HP and 700 frontal armor, as well as 300 on the flanks. With the up armored package, it's 17 HP and 400 heat armor. So this is always going to be a 3-shot kill. Yes, the rear armor is weaker, but it's actually really hard in this game to get rear armor shots unless you have multiple things shooting, because the vehicle will automatically face its most dangerous threat. It doesn't have much in the way of weaponry, but in terms of getting units to the front against a heavy armor threat from Americans, this is a very cheap way to do so. Let the infantry do the fighting and then get this guy out or move them back to safety when you're done. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the US vehicles that have kind of weird behavior. So the first one is the M1A1 FEP, which a lot of people like to carry because it can get a trophy for APS. Its HE round only has 120 explosive penetration, which causes it to behave weirdly. So against a normal Sprut, it's a 2-shot kill, as you'd expect. But against the up-armored Sprut SD, it is a 3-shot kill, right? So that 16 HP, 200 armor boundary does not apply. It's 120 armor boundary is kind of what you're looking at here. So the example is the B10 Kurganets, which for most of the tanks that we're talking about is a 2-shot kill no matter what. With the M1A1 FEP, it is a 3-shot kill. All right, the next vehicle I want to highlight is the M728 CEV from the Marine Corps specialization. It has this Hesh round with 17 damage and 300 explosive penetration. What that means is that against non-up armored Russian vehicles and infantry carriers, it's essentially a 1-shot kill, right? So we got a BMP-3 here without the up armor, and you can see, boom, 1-shot kill. Same thing, Sprut SD without the additional armor package, 1-shot kill. And the B10 Kurganets or the K17 Boomerang, which can't add armor but only APS, 1-shot kill. Against these up armored vehicles, you'll see it does suffer quite a bit. In this case, going to be a 3-shot kill just because of the low damage output and low penetration. I just wanted to highlight this because this vehicle can be really effective if you determine that your opponent is using lighter carriers or carriers without upper armor, because that 1-shot, then with the follow-up against infantry with the Hesh round, very, very effective. The Sheridan is another vehicle I want to highlight from the airborne specialization. It has 2 round choices with lower penetration but very high damage values, and so it can consistently 2-shot transport vehicles. And then because of the HE rounds available to it, it also does really well against the infantry that pop out. But the best factor for the Sheridan is its low cost. It trades very efficiently against IFV spam. And the other thing to keep in mind with the Sheridan, you don't want to equip the Shalala missiles because that'll cause it to behave in an unusual fashion at range. Instead, you want to keep it using these HE rounds to shoot through enemy IFVs and then follow up against their infantry. Next, I want to talk about the Bookers. Now, against lighter vehicles like the IFVs we're talking about here, you're going to see the autocannon actually performs better because its kinetic round has 180 millimeters of kinetic penetration, which is better than most of these vehicles. Most of the Russian IFVs have relatively low kinetic armor, but relatively high explosive armor. So the fire rate from the autocannon, it basically fires in 3-round bursts, makes it much more effective than the Booker with the M35 main gun, even though its Sabo rounds have up to 520 millimeters of kinetic penetration. So quick demo here. This is at 2x speed. But you see the Booker with the autocannon just chewing through these struts. Naturally, this Booker decides to help for whatever reason. But you see that autocannon chewing through those vehicles relatively quickly. And last, for those of you who are wondering, the Striker MGS's gun performs very similarly to the FEP in that it will two-shot light carrier vehicles, but once they're up armored, it is a 3-shot almost exclusively across the board. Here you see 5.5 damage. You're going to need 3 shots to kill this Sprut with the kinetic rounds, the Sabo rounds here. But against other vehicles, lighter vehicles, it's a 2-shot kill. So if you're running the Cav specialization and not airborne, this is very similar to the Sheridan in its performance. Really only good against units that are running non-up armored or maybe transports that focus on APS. All right, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you found this helpful. I plan on doing more of these kind of single issue videos, keeping them a little bit shorter and a little bit more focused going forward. If there's anything else you want me to cover, whether it's from the recent patch or just mechanics in general, please hit me up in the comments, and we'll see y'all in the next one.